Hey, what's going on guys? Daniel from ModBot here, and if you look around, we have a different background again, which means that we are back in my parents' office. And last time we were in here, we did a review on a phone. It was the Migu M1. Well, I figured it was only appropriate to go back here again. So today we're going to be reviewing the Oukitel Mix 2, which I got in a few weeks ago. I've been using this as my primary phone since the first of the year, so since New Year's. And I feel like it's time for me to give a review on this. So in this video, we're going to go over some of the specs and the things I like and the things I dislike. So I've been using this phone since the new year, and I've got some really good things and a few gripes with this phone, similarly to the Migu M1. The biggest thing about the Oukitel Mix 2 is that I was impressed by the camera. It said that it recorded in 4K, and I was hoping that it would have a better shutter speed than the Migu M1, because the Migu M1's shutter speed is insanely slow. Like, it is insanely slow. So I saw this one. It's a brand new Android phone on the market out in China, and I had to get my hands on it. So let's go ahead and first go over some of the specs. So the CPU is a Helio P25. It's an octa-core processor running at 2.39 gigahertz, which I may be mistaken, but I want to say that's the same processor as in the Migu M1. The GPU in this phone is a Mali T880. It has 6 gigs of RAM, a 64 gigabyte ROM, which is expandable up to, I believe, 512 gigabytes via the micro SD card slot. So again, so far we're neck and neck in terms of specs between these two phones. The screen is a 6-inch LTPS. The kind of unique thing about that, though, is the resolution on this phone. If you kind of see these two side by side, you should be able to potentially see that the Oukitel Mix 2 is a narrower phone. And the resolution on this phone is actually 2160 by 1080. So it's got a interesting resolution, which is kind of essentially due to its almost borderless. It nearly has a borderless frame. So on the bottom, it does have some actual, black space between the screen and the side, but on the top, it's nearly borderless. I don't know, again, with the reflection, how well you can see that, but you have to take my word for it, or I'll try to get another shot for you guys of that. So the only thing is, with YouTube videos, it's got a little bit of black bar on the side, but if you pinch zoom, it'll zoom in, which is typically what I do when I'm watching a YouTube video on this phone, or typically what I did while watching a YouTube video on this phone. So on the rear of the phone, just like on the other one again, it's super similar, a lot of the features. We've got two cameras. One of them is a 21 megapixel camera, and one of them is a 2 megapixel camera. It is also capable of recording 4K at 30 frames per second, and it is, or 1080p at 60 frames per second. The video is actually, I was impressed with the camera on this phone. It is a lot better than the Migu M1, but we'll get into that in a minute. The front of the phone has a camera on the bottom, which is really strange, and a little LED next to it. That is a 13 megapixel camera. It's got a 4080 milliamp battery, which I believe is about 1000 milliamps smaller than the Migu M1. Still has a really good battery life, but I did notice a little bit more drain on this quicker than on the Migu M1 naturally, with that 25% increase on the M1. So other than that, it's got Bluetooth 4.2, and it does have the ability to have dual SIM. Similarly to that of the Migu M1 also, it seems that the dual SIM is in the SIM tray, but it also takes the space of a micro SD card. So your options are basically having dual SIMs or single SIM with a micro SD card expansion. So you kind of have to pick and choose which one you want more. But again, luckily it does have 64 gigs built in, which is quite a lot for your average phone user. I personally don't go over that, but then again, I'm not one of those crazy Instagrammers that takes tons of photos and videos, which would take up, a substantial amount of space, which at that point, maybe you would want some extended memory. So let's go over some of the pros with this phone. First pro, if I can take this cover off, is the phone is gorgeous. It really is a nice phone. I don't know, again, with the reflection, I'll have to get some other shots, but the body's glass. It's like an all-glass phone. From doing my little bit of research, I couldn't tell you what kind of glass it is, whether it's Gorilla or, what exactly it is, but it's glass. And, I mean, the only thing I could really compare it to in terms of having the glass is it reminds me kind of like an iPhone. But again, it's not an iPhone by any means. But, again, it's got that whole gloss black look on the back. The only downside to that is that you do get fingerprints on it pretty heavily. Although I have a case on it, so that's not really a big deal to me. I just, clean it off before I put it in the case, that way you don't see the fingerprints. But if you don't use a case, then you definitely will see fingerprints in the reflection on this. But even the sides of this phone all seem to be made out of that same glass material. And then the front is, again, primarily screen with, I guess, a little bit of that glass on the bottom of it too, where there's a little bit of a bezel. But the phone is extremely, it feels like a quality phone. It's heavy. It's heavier than the Migu M1, pretty substantially heavier. And yeah, it's a really good looking phone, which is another thing that I was really impressed with, was just how nice of a design this phone has. So on top of that, the screen quality is extremely nice. It just looks good. Again, it's got that 2160 by 1080 resolution, so things look great. I can show you guys, I don't know, again, how well this will work, but I mean, with the backlight all the way up, I don't have it on that finger. We'll just use my passcode. Okay. So, I mean, again, it doesn't do justice looking at a screen from, a lens, but the screen's really, really nice, and the pixels look phenomenal. All of the colors are very vibrant, and you will not be disappointed with the screen on this phone. If you're disappointed with the screen on this phone, then I don't know what you're wanting, but to me, it's a phenomenal looking screen, and yeah, you couldn't ask for really a better screen. Next, similar to the Migu M1, is the snappiness of the phone. Again, this doesn't really do justice just flipping back and forth, but it is an extremely snappy phone, and due to the 6 gigs of RAM, you can multitask like crazy. I commonly have 8 or 10 apps open, not because I run multiple things at once, but I just forget to close them for whatever reasoning, and I did not notice any stalling at all. I mean, having 8 or 10 apps open. Granted, I'm sure if you're running 3 games or 4 games or something like that, then you might run into an issue. I didn't do much gaming on this phone because I'm not a mobile gamer. I don't like mobile gaming at all. I've tried and I just can't. I need buttons, either keyboard or a controller, so I didn't do mobile gaming, but I would imagine you should be able to mobile game fine. The only thing I did try out a little bit was Hearthstone, which ran fine. So, but yeah, if you're doing intense gaming, I didn't review it for that, so sorry. I want to review this phone for people that are interested in a phone, but again, it's I don't do mobile gaming, so that's kind of not, at least right now, what I'm trying to cover with what I think makes a phone good or not. But that's personal preference, because again, there's nothing wrong with mobile gaming. One other thing that is cool, because of the resolution and how the phone itself is more long than it is, well, how do I describe that? It's narrower than most phones that I've had, so I don't know how well you can see this. You can't really see with the case on it, but the overall shape of this phone, granted, I do have fairly large hands, so if you have small hands, you might disagree with me, but to me, it feels very nice in the hand. It's secure. It's not too wide. While I feel like the Migu M1, again, the case does add some bulkiness to it, but it feels like more of a stretch for my hand, while with the Oukitel Mix 2, it just seems like the perfect balance of the phone being really nice and large on the screen, so you can see things and watch videos and multitask and do all the stuff you want to do on your app without having to, zoom in or anything like that, but it's also small enough to where it doesn't feel like you're necessarily carrying around a huge brick. At least, again, in my experience. If you're coming from a really small phone, you might think, damn, this is a really big phone, but if we're talking standard phones on the market today, this does not feel like an insanely large phone to me. It feels right in kind of the middle area, I suppose, between what I believe they call them phablets, the kind of in-between tablet phone thing, and then your more standard small phone. Because screens are getting bigger on all phones, so, but again, they did a really good job of incorporating that big screen size with not being too bulky to where it's a pain in the ass. Like I said, the battery life is pretty good. There was 2 big things that I wanted an improvement over the Migu M1, and it delivered in both of those aspects. Well, it's more like one aspect, and then the other one is just a given, kind of. But the camera on this is phenomenal. It is night and day compared to the Migu M1. The shutter speed is quick. On the Migu M1, I have to take a photo, and I have to hold the camera there after it's taken the photo for a second or two for it to actually not blur, because the shutter is that slow. On this one, it's very snappy. It is nearly instant. It's not instant. There's still quicker shutters out there for sure. But I believe I saw somewhere that they used a Samsung shutter in here, which I don't know whether that's accurate or not, or whether it's, you know, like false advertisement. I really don't know, but I'm just saying that the quality is really good of both video and photos, and I'll put some of the photos and stuff like that I took. I took some random photos on here to show you guys, but I was extremely delighted with the quality of the camera. Again, in low light, it's not as good, but that's kind of expected. But in mid to good lighting, it is phenomenal. It's a really, really good camera, and it is heaps and bounds over the Amigo M1. As far as the front camera goes, I'll get into that in a little bit under, I guess, the cons. But the quality is not bad on it at all, and I would say it's probably very close to the Amigo M1. Amigo M1's front camera might be a little bit better, to be actually fair with you, but I feel like the front camera on this phone is better than the rear camera, which is strange. While on this one, the rear is a lot better, which to me is more what I want. I'm not a big selfie guy, so, you know, to take photos of projects and things I see is more what I want. So that was a big thing to me, was the camera, and it did not disappoint at all. So the next big thing, which is, again, not even necessarily in the phone itself, but the company behind it, is that it came with a screen protector pre-installed on both the front and the back glass. I didn't take the back glass one off, I don't think. And the front one I'm definitely not taking off, which that was awesome, because this one came with one too, but it wasn't applied, and I screwed it up because screen protectors are kind of a pain in the ass when you live somewhere that's got a decent amount of debris and dust flying around. It was destroyed before I even got a chance, and then I couldn't find another one. Well, this one comes pre-installed, so you're guaranteed to have a screen protector. And if that wasn't good enough, it also comes with this. It's just a little, you know, nylon, cheap, flimsy case, but this thing is awesome. And again, this is all that I wanted. It's just a clear case, not too, you know, flashy or blingy. You know, clear white or black or any just neutral color would have been, you know, fine. But literally, it came in here, and so you got a cover. And one, that's huge on this phone because this phone is glass again, so it's even more fragile than the Amigo M1. But on top of that, I couldn't find a case for this, remember? So I went ahead and 3D modeled and 3D printed one, which was fine, but this is a lot more convenient, and not everybody has a 3D printer or the time or wants to do that. So that's like a game changer for me. That was awesome. Now, the other thing, last thing I'll point out that I was happy with is in terms of like the sound and audio quality. This thing does have really solid speakers. Amigo M1's probably a little bit louder, but these are still really good speakers. But the earpiece on this is significantly better than the Amigo M1. It sounds like it's a lot louder and a lot clearer. When I was talking on the phone, it was much easier to clearly hear what was being said, no matter whether there was background noise and stuff like that going on. And yeah, I'm happy with that. While again, I'm comparing these two phones. The Amigo M1 to me was more of a kind of a pain, and sometimes I have a hard time hearing what someone's saying, especially if there's some substantial background noise going on. Now that we talked about all the pros, let's talk about some of the cons, the things I don't really like about this phone. And for starters, it is the camera on the bottom of the screen. It's awkward, it's strange, I don't understand why. The only thing I can think of is that the Oukitel was trying to do something different, and they did do something different, but it was silly. One, it's really awkward, like the angle when you're taking a photo in the front, it's really awkward having to look on the bottom. It's a lot easier to cover, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, I caught myself trying to turn it the other direction, even though that's not right. So that was really silly, and it would have been so much better to put it on the top. The only thing I could think of is that they didn't want to do that because of the lack of space between screen and the border, but they should have just, if they had to, pulled it down or something to make way for the camera. But camera on the bottom is definitely not the business. I don't like that at all, so that was silly on their part. So other than that, there's, well, one other thing, I guess. The USB the USB charging port is a micro USB, which is disappointing because USB Type-C is a thing, and the Amigo M1 had USB Type-C, and this phone just launched, I think, in the last little bit here. So you think that new phones coming on the market, again, in this price range, which is anywhere from $200 to $300 range, so you can find it as low as $2, or average, I think, is around $260. It should have USB Type-C. It's kind of become more of a standard, I feel like, in the mobile phone industry, and it should also have that on here. It does not. I don't know that that's a deal breaker for me, but I just don't understand that decision with making this phone, why they would not have gone with Type-C. Now, the last reason, and the biggest con of this phone for me, which is the reason why it will not be my daily phone, and why, although it has the camera that I love and so many great things, I will be going back to the Migu M1 as of this next week or so here, is it is not compatible with my network. And when I say it's not compatible with my network, I have T-Mobile in the United States, and it does work with T-Mobile. I've been able to text and make calls and use the phone fine. But the bandwidth, or the frequency, the frequency between T-Mobile satellites and this phone are not compatible. So you get no internet. You don't get 4G, you don't even get 3G. It says you can get 2G, but the Edge doesn't even work at all. I've not been able to load a web page unless I'm on Wi-Fi. So again, it is compatible, from what I saw, with quite a few other US carriers, and you will be able to use the 4G, and I think even the 4G LTE, but for me, I am not, and I cannot have a phone that I cannot use the internet unless I'm on Wi-Fi, because that defeats the purpose of most of the apps and, you know, certain aspects. Luckily, the GPS has been working, because it doesn't need the, data connection. It's a different connection, but still super disappointed in that respect, and I wish that they could have included it, because this would definitely be replacing my Migu M1, no doubt at all. So anyways, guys, this is the Oukitel Mix 2. Again, it's been really fun using this phone over the last couple weeks here. Links will be in the description if you want to find out more or purchase one for yourself. And I will see if I can get some kind of a discount code through GearBest for this phone. But hope you guys are all doing well, and I've got a ton of videos going on, so I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have any other questions or something I didn't cover, leave a comment down below, and I will do my best to get back to you as quick as I possibly can. And on that note, I am out. Peace, guys.